Back now to the biggest story of indeed the globe at the moment. Donald Trump has won the US presidential election and will become the 47th president of the United States. Also worth noting as well, in Congress elections, Republicans have won a majority in the US Senate, seizing control of the chamber for the first time in 4 years. Joining me now for reaction to this is political commentator, and I'll say congratulations already, that is Christian Malietoa-Brown. Welcome in.
Thanks for having me, and thanks. There was no doubt in my mind that we were going to win, so it's a great, great morning.
Yeah, well, indeed. I mean, the polls could not have been more wrong, right? In the lead up to the US election, they were touting this as going to be a tightly contested race. Could not be further from it.
Yeah, they're saying, oh, it could be, we probably won't know who's going to win maybe until 4 days out. It could take us all the way to the weekend, could take a week. But no, it was pretty decisive last night. I think uh, people were shocked just how wrong it was, and I think especially, we've been saying, I said this for a long time, the media and the mainstream media and the role that it plays, and the people that take these polls and things. I think the whole political establishment needs to look at itself again and really consider the future, because if it keeps doing this, nobody's going to watch them or listen to them or pay any attention to them at all, because they were so wrong.
Yep, couldn't agree more. Look, I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second here. If we take a look at Vanity Fair's cover this morning, it highlights 34 felony counts, 1 conviction, 2 cases pending, 2 impeachments, 6 bankruptcies. 4 more years of Donald Trump. Have we put aside his indiscretion, do you think?
I think that's, well, you could talk about the felonies and stuff like that. A lot of people who voted for Trump weren't, I think, are not bothered by that, because in their mind, America is so partisan, it's so corrupt, it's so screwed up that they see Trump as the person who's out there taking the hits for them, and you got to remember, the people that voted for Trump, he didn't, they didn't just win. Trump didn't just win the presidency, they didn't just win the Senate, they're probably going to win the Congress, but he also won the popular vote, and that's something huge. So when Hillary won, they keep going, oh, we need to get rid of the Electoral College. The popular vote is what matters. We need to go back to popular vote. Trump won the popular vote this time. So what's this saying to people? It's people who've been looked down on this whole for the last however long, could be, at least the last decade. People have been talked down on, told that they're archaic, told that they're backwards, told that that they're uneducated, that they're stupid. And then it gets even worse. They're told that they're fascist. They're told that they're racist. They're told they're misogynist. And yet they're just normal people who are trying to make something of their lives, who are just trying to get by. And I said this example yesterday with, if you've seen Hunger Games, you have these elites, in the capital. In our case, it's in wherever it is, California or New York, and who are trying to tell people, oh, life is great, and just do as we say, and and they're trying to push these crazy things. Whereas you got normal people that are just struggling to feed their families, put their kids through school, who just want, just normal decency, and so to them, they see Trump as the person who's out there taking the hits for them, and Trump says it himself. He goes, they hate you. It's not that they hate me. He says, not that they hate me, they hate you, but I'm just standing in their way. And so when you hear about these felony counts and all of these things that come in and whatever convictions and stuff, people don't care, because they're like, they don't believe. That's how, and that's what I mean by the mainstream media, the political elite. People don't trust them so much that they don't even know if some of these are true. Like, for example, most of these cases that were taken against Trump were taken in by radically left or partisan attorney generals or stuff like that. And so they're like, well, had it been tried in a Republican state, Trump would have probably got away. He probably wouldn't have been taken to court in the first place. But that's how partisan America is now, where you can't even, you can't even trust the courts and things like that. So
Yeah.
for me, I think we, especially us sitting here on the other side of the world, we really got to take note of this. Is that us as Kiwis, okay? At the end of elections, most Kiwis sit back and they're like, okay, we have a new prime minister, we have a new government. We'll put up with them for 3 years and then get rid of them. But people don't, people don't lose their minds and things like that. But I think it's really important for us to note that this people don't care about any of this stuff, because to them they've been talked down on so much that they're willing to take anyone but the establishment.
Yeah.
Despite all of Trump's, because everyone knows Trump's, he's a rough guy. They don't agree with probably, at least 50% of what he says. They don't agree with, 50% of what he does. And that's how bad it is, that they will take Trump and all warts and all his, what do you say, indiscretions or whatever you said, all of that. They'll take all of that over the political elite and the establishment. And I thought we learned our lesson in 2016, and apparently we didn't. So now they've got the popular vote. So
Yeah.
hopefully we get some unity from this, and people actually start to be a bit introspective on why they lost.
Yes, totally. A final question for you. What kind of president do you think he'll be for our neck of the woods, the Pacific, New Zealand?
Well, you have people freaking out, like, I'm a National Party member. You have people from the National Party freaking out on X last night. Oh, I feel sorry for the New Zealand businesses that are going to get slapped with 20% tariffs and things like that. And for me, I'm like, well, Trump's not New Zealand's president. Trump is America's president. He's got to do what's good for America. So for us here in New Zealand, I think it's going to be a wake up call. But we have Winston there who was foreign minister, and we had a pretty good deal with America before. So Winston actually has a pretty good relationship with America. You have Luxon who spent a lot of time in America and stuff like that. So I think Trump is going to be true to himself. He's got the art of the deal. He's going to try and do a negotiation. And if we come to the table with what we can really bring, what makes New Zealand great, which is the fact that we're a beautiful country. We're green. We have that brand across the world. I think we can do a deal with Trump where we come out pretty good in this as well, and the Pacific an extension of that, of that whole relationship. So I'm not going to be one of those doomsday people that say it's going to be horrible for New Zealand. I think if we have good negotiators there, we can get a really good deal, because that's what Trump's saying a lot of the time about it. There's got to be deals that are also beneficial to America. Can't just let people come in and rob all the eggs and then, and then they're sitting there with nothing. So I think if we have our leaders present a really good case, I don't think it's going to be as bad as people are saying.
Yes, certainly. Hey, thank you very much for your time as always and your expertise. Really appreciate it. That is Christian Malietoa-Brown, political commentator. You have a good rest of your day, eh?
Yes,
You've
thank you.
been hammering home this point all morning, but I'll say it one more time. 34 felony counts, 1 conviction, 2 cases pending, 2 impeachments, 6 bankruptcies and 4 more years of Donald Trump. The former US president has pulled off one of the greatest election comebacks of all time and has promised already a new golden age for America. Joining us now is Democratic Party strategist Mary-Anne Marsh. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Good morning, William.
This is a shocker of a result for you, no doubt?
No question. And for everybody, not just me. It's not something anyone predicted. Neither the Harris nor the Trump campaign believed this was what was going to happen at all. Throughout this campaign and all day yesterday, they all thought it was going to be very close. And they would pick, a hard-fought, hard-counted race that would still be going on today. Instead, all the dominoes fell to Donald Trump in spectacular fashion with, big margins. And now he has not only the White House, but the Senate and likely the House of Representatives as well. So he will control the entire government come January 2025.
And, that's the astonishing thing here. The polls in the lead up to this election made it look as though it was an incredibly tight race. But taking a look at the numbers, even safe areas that are usually safe for the Democrats, Kamala barely won.
Exactly right. New York, New Jersey, Illinois, Virginia, go through the list, and they were all low single-digit wins. And usually those are like 20-point wins, 25-point wins. And it's hard to say today why. I mean, there are lots of explanations, but I would offer two. One is Kamala Harris ran for president in 107 days, and that has never been done. Donald Trump has been running for president for 9+ years with little opposition, except for the 2016 campaign at the end and the 2024 campaign. So he's had 9 years to persuade people to see the world as he sees it. And as a result, the people who gave him this big victory, men, Latinos, and white working women, are the very people who are going to be harmed by his policies, not helped by them. So they're voting against their own self-interest, and that's the most befuddling thing of all.
What message do you think this sends to women in the US, that a man can have a say on the rights of their own body, and that a man can say horrific things about a woman in a public forum and ultimately become the president once again?
In 24 hours, women in this country went from thinking that they would elect the first woman president in the history of the United States of America, almost 250 years, to seeing that they are indeed second-class citizens at best, frankly, on their way to being third and fourth-class citizens. Donald Trump in 2016 said he would ban abortion and women would be punished, and that's one of the few campaign promises he kept. Abortion has basically been banned in the United States, and women are dying every day because they can't get health care. He's going to ban IVF and contraception. He's even looking at rescinding the 19th Amendment, which gives women the right to vote. So women across this country, but for those that supported Donald Trump, really look in the mirror and say, we've worked so hard, we've come so far, we had a right for 50 years, now it's taken away from us. What is left for us? Oh, and also taking away no-fault divorce. So forcing you to stay in marriages that could be abusive.
Yeah, it's grim stuff. Look, let's take a look within the Democrats now. In the Democratic Party, there will be a heck of a lot of soul-searching, right?
Oh, no question about it. And going back to Joe Biden staying as long as he did, it is clear now he wouldn't have been able to get through this campaign, just not even counting the debate that was so difficult for him. Kamala Harris was everybody's best belief that she could pull this off. And for every reason I outlined already, she should have. So now the question is, how do we go forward? And for friends of mine and colleagues that I've spoken to this morning on very little sleep, we're all looking at 730 days, which is the midterm elections. So how many people can we get elected? How many Democrats can we get elected at the end of 730 days, when the Democrats have a more favorable Senate map, win back the House? And if we could get the House and or the Senate, maybe put some guardrails on Donald Trump for the last 2 years. But the damage that will be done in the first 2 years is nothing short of devastating.
Are the Democrats, and this perhaps might be a facetious question here, are the Democrats light on talent now that Kamala's out?
No, there's a great bench of Democratic governors around the country. Maura Healey, I'm in Massachusetts, is great. Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania, Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan. There's some Gavin Newsom in California. There's some very talented Democrats out there. So there's no shortage of talent. I do think everyone needs to listen and learn and understand why people vote against their own self-interest. And especially, like everyone said, it was the economy. So we've talked about abortion. Lots of people in the surveys, including Trump supporters, said, well, it's the economy. Now here, the irony here is Donald Trump's going to give tax cuts, but they're not, the people who voted for him aren't going to get them, except for the wealthiest people of all. They say it's so expensive to buy goods and services and products these days. Well, Donald Trump's going to put a tariff on them, and it's going to go up 20%, and you're really not going to be able to afford anything. And already Trump and Elon Musk stated that there will be suffering from the economy, so we can get it back on the right track. So Joe Biden cleaned up let's start. Barack Obama gave Donald Trump the best economy of his lifetime. He tanked it and didn't, fail to deal with COVID properly. Every Democrat, including Joe Biden, always cleans up after the Republican before them, put the economy back on track. The U.S. has the best economy in the world, obviously still working on things to try to get some prices down. But our economy is supporting the world right now, not just the United States. So right. That is in severe jeopardy in the not too distant future.
Then what do you, I mean, this is a tough question to ask, but, It just makes you think, why on earth did Trump get such a win like he did last night if, ultimately highlighting all of what you just did? I mean, has he tapped into this mindset in the US among some voters, or perhaps quite a lot of voters, as it seems last night, of where they just feel as though they're really down?
Yes, I think you hit the nail on the head. And again, for 9 years, Donald Trump has been telling millions of people in this country that this is a terrible country, a failing country, that is being invaded, that the economy is terrible, that you don't have enough money, on and on and on. And all of them lies. But yet the people who went to his rallies and supported him would stand there and repeat the very things that aren't true. So everyone can fact check all they want, but that became the truth to tens of millions of people over the last 9 years that then put him back in the White House.
A scary prospect. Look, before we wrap it up, I just want to get your assessment. What kind of president do you think Trump will be on the world stage? Obviously, we take a look here in New Zealand and in the Pacific. We had record investment from the Biden administration in the Pacific, particularly when it comes to infrastructure, getting things like education up and running. Will that cease under Trump, do you think? And ultimately, what kind of president will he be on the global stage?
So we've talked about the investments in the Pacific before, and Kamala Harris, commitment to that region and investments as well. It will depend on what Xi Jinping wants, right? I mean, in the end, Xi Jinping, the big day yesterday, besides for Donald Trump, was for Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. Everybody got what they wanted. And so if you go across the globe here, I mean, Netanyahu. So Trump was going to let Netanyahu do whatever he wants in Israel, give him anything he wants, and then throw in Iran too. Putin wants Ukraine, and he's going to end all the aid to Zelensky and turn Ukraine over to Putin. Putin then can go right across Europe as he wants. Xi Jinping was part of the interference in our election this week, and so was Russia, who had bomb threats and disinformation and all that. And as we've talked about before, Taiwan, and then your region is right on the map there. So Trump only does things that for his self-interest and benefit, and he'll leave NATO. He will take weapons from people. He will give weapons to people that shouldn't have them. And so there's going to be, besides the economic chaos that could ensue, the national security threats are only going to increase. We saw that in his first term. He's more dangerous in his second term.
Yeah, and look, final question for you, not to end on a grim note, but I mean, just read the man's words, particularly in the past. Do you think he will give the role up after his time is up in office?
If anyone thinks that yesterday we're going to have another election after yesterday, I think the odds of that aren't very good at all. And I think I can't even picture today what has to happen to make sure we have an election again. But I hope everybody voted yesterday, because we may not vote again.
Jeepers. Are you scared of violence breaking out in your country?
Yes, I mean, I think everyone was concerned about it around the election, and because Trump was doing well, there wasn't any violence. I don't think that's a coincidence.
Yeah.
I do think, going back to his when he first went into office, there were a lot of protests. And I think everyone should remember that everyone who participated on his behalf on January 6th and the insurrection and attacking the Capitol, one of the first things he'll do in January is pardon them and let them out of jail.
That is Mary-Anne Marsh, Democratic Party strategist. Thank you so much for your time, and all the best as well over there. Really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, William.
Cheers. Now, of course, Donald Trump has won the US presidential election and will become the 47th president of the United States. He will now serve a second term in a momentous comeback after losing 4 years ago. In Congress elections, Republicans have won a majority in the US Senate, seizing control of the chamber for the first time in 4 years. Now, initial exit polls showed economy, immigration and the future of democracy were the leading issues for voters. Joining me now is Marco Rubio's former Chief of Staff, Matt Terrill. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
What a night for the Republicans, eh? I mean, firstly, your reaction?
Yeah, big night for Republicans. Big night for former President Trump, now soon to be the next president of the United States. And the reality is, I think, whether you're a Trump supporter or not, you have to recognize that this was not just a big win in terms of the Electoral College, but the fact that he won the popular vote, that's a big deal as well. And in addition, look, control of the Senate is now with Republicans. I'll go towards the Republicans. The House appears like it'll stay with the Republicans as well. So this is going to give President Trump a mandate, a political mandate to go into Washington and to fulfill the policies that he campaigned on. That's something that he has with the backing of Congress, as well as the backing of his support in the Electoral College and with the popular vote. That gives him that political mandate going into Washington starting in January.
Why do you think the Republican Party and perhaps, Trump's stance and policies resonates so much with US voters?
Well, look, a big part of this is the fact that right now, in the United States, Americans have been faced with inflation. Under the Biden-Harris administration, you've had 20% plus inflation in many cases. You've had a border security issue that many Americans have been frustrated with. And those are really the two main issues that drove this election. If you look at all the polling in this election, by and large, those are the two issues that voters cared about. And, voters were given a unique opportunity in this race to compare and contrast records. They're able to look at Vice President Harris's record during her time in the White House with President Biden on those issues and compare it to President Trump's record when he was in office. And if they look at President Trump's record, for example, on inflation, they saw that, inflation was below 2% when he left office and been at 20% under the Biden-Harris administration. The reality is that was powerful, I think. But in addition to that, what you've seen is that President Trump was just resonating with voters and frankly going to voters where they are today. You're not just speaking to traditional media platforms, but going on podcasts, going into New York, going into California, places where traditionally, in many cases, Democrat voters live, and going to speak to them. I think that helped him, frankly, in terms of expanding his base and reaching new voters in this election.
Where do you think it went wrong for the Harris campaign? And one particular gripe I had with Harris's campaign was she surrounded herself with celebrities, with these massive celebrity endorsements, to the extent where it almost kind of felt elitist.
I think, the endorsements certainly, in my view at least, don't really matter in campaigns. I don't think they make or break a candidate. To your point, what voters care about is authenticity, and they care about the policies. This was a policy election, but it's also a change election. And, look, the reality is, I think the number one question she had to answer, among a few, but the main question was, how is she going to be different than President Biden? And she couldn't, frankly, answer the question, or I should say, chose not to answer the question. She was given multiple opportunities during this campaign to answer that very question. How are you going to be different than President Biden? And it was an important question to answer because right now, over 70% of Americans think the country's going the wrong course, going in the wrong direction. If this was a change election, her goal should have been to figure out how can she make it clear to the American people how she will bring change to Washington. How will she be different than President Biden? And the second question I think that she had struggled with is answering how voters are better off today than they were 4 years ago, particularly on the economy and inflation. And I think that's a real challenge for her campaign. And then finally, I'll just say, she running in a primary process strengthens a candidate. You go through the process of doing the primary debates, campaigning on the stump in primary states. She didn't do that. She got the nomination essentially during the convention in August. And from there was off and running. But that was a very tight, I think, window for her to run and make a case, and clearly didn't do an effective job because she didn't win.
That's right. And to the credit of the Republican Party, at least from all the way here in New Zealand, it seems much more throughout the year to be much more disciplined compared to the Democrats, which ultimately seemed pretty shambolic, obviously with the Biden situation and then Kamala stepping in. How would you characterize the two differences this campaign?
Well, I'll tell you, I think this is the most disciplined campaign that President Trump has ever ran. And that credit goes not only to him as a candidate who won here, but also to his campaign team. And I think do campaigns make mistakes? Winning and losing campaigns always make mistakes. But the reality is they had a lot of opportunities that they really leaned into. And the other thing I will just mention is President Trump in his campaign was outspent. Vice President Harris had more money to spend in this campaign, but President Trump went and did things that didn't cost any money. Going on a podcast doesn't cost money. That's not the same as doing a TV ad buy, for example. So I think beyond President Trump's policies resonating with the majority of Americans in this race, particularly on the economy, inflation, and border security, the campaign that they ran, I think, was different. It's different than past election campaigns we've seen here in the United States, going on the podcast, talking to influencers that voters, particularly young voters, are tuned to. And I'll just say that the Harris campaign, even the final hours of this race, was talking about how they've been knocking on doors and making phone calls and doing the traditional tactics that a campaign does. I think that's going to be looked at here and analyzed by both Republicans and Democrats alike. I think President Trump, in many ways, changed campaigns forever going forward.
I mean, ultimately now we're in this situation, and there'll be plenty of people pleased, of course, based off the result over in the US of the result. But ultimately, where to for Trump in terms of trying to unify the country? Do you think that'll be a difficult task?
I think it's vital for President Trump to unify the country. I'm confident he can do it. And look, the reality is he may have a majority, it appears certainly in the Senate, winning the Senate, and likely will have a majority in the House of Representatives. But the reality is you got to be able to win over the American people. And he's done that in this election, clearly in the Electoral College and in the popular vote. But it's important to sustain that. It's important to really, I think, out of the gate, govern on the issues that all Americans care about. All Americans care about inflation. All Americans care about border security. That's evident in the results of this race. So I think what you're likely going to see is what does he do out of the gate day one as president? I think he's going to be doing a lot of things to try and bolster the economy, improve inflation, and certainly tackle border security. And then beyond that, I think what you saw in his speech last night was one in which where I think he was trying to reach out, unify the country, and make the case why all Americans can come together over the next 4 years. But that's going to be incumbent on him as a leader to do that. I'm confident he can.
Certainly, and things are already changing in terms of momentum. The market's responding incredibly well to this. Let's talk about it in a world perspective now. What kind of presidency do you think Trump will bring to global issues and foreign policy like us right here in New Zealand?
Sure. Well, look, during the campaign, obviously domestic issues really were the top concerns and really the top discussion during the campaign. But to your point, foreign policy matters without question, and voters care about it here in the United States. And certainly on the global stage, there are people around the world watching what's happening here. And to that end, I think certainly with the Ukraine-Russia conflict, Middle East, I think you're going to see certainly President Trump take that on day one. But furthermore, I think he's going to lean into what he really governed on during the 4 years when he was in office in his last term. And he talked about a lot in the campaign. That was just starting no new wars. That's a big theme that he championed, particularly towards the tail end of his campaign. I think you're going to likely see him lean into that. I think the American people don't want new wars. They want to find peace and prosperity, not just here, but abroad. So I think that's going to be key. And then on the financial stage as well, that's going to be an important thing. He's talked about, for example, taxes here in the United States and tax policy that will have a huge impact, I think, on what companies do, not just here in the United States, but what do they do abroad. That's going to be a key theme as well. But we'll see what takes shape here. It's going to be coming on him to lead, not just on the domestic issues here, but the key foreign policy issues that Americans care about as well.
Yeah, certainly. And before I let you go, just final question. China is perhaps the lingering problem this side of the world in terms of some perceive it, experts perceive it as its expansionism mindset. Obviously, there's concerns China would perhaps want to take Taiwan. How do you think Trump will navigate that relationship with China?
Well, I certainly want to speak for President Trump on that. My guess, though, is he's going to likely, this is just my assumption, take on many of the similar tactics that he deployed in the first term of his presidency. You saw him go over and meet with world leaders, saw him go over and meet with the leader of North Korea. You saw him going over and trying to use diplomacy in many ways in negotiations. And I'll tell you this, I think many would argue that one of President Trump's strengths for those who've been around him is that he's pretty good one-on-one. He's good when you're one-on-one, having a discussion, negotiating. He tends to do that. He'll have members of Congress on Air Force One. He does it with members of Congress. He has discussions, has negotiations. I would suspect you're going to see him deploy that similar tactic on the global stage. I'll tell you, he campaigned aggressively on essentially saying he does not want new wars. I frankly think war is the last thing that he wants in his second term. I think he wants his second term to be about prosperity. Other key issues, I think he wants to make it where there's peace and prosperity, not just here, but abroad. Again, it's going to be up to him to do that. But I think his one-on-one approach, negotiating, that tends to be a tactic he deploys not just here, but abroad in foreign policy discussions as well.
Have you had time to celebrate?
A lot of people are both celebrating here in Washington. Certainly there's Democrats who are disappointed with the results. And I'll just tell you, I think Democrats recognize that there's a need here. Democrats I'm talking to here recognize there's a need to rebrand, frankly, to regroup as a party for the Democrat Party. But Republicans are absolutely celebrating. They feel great about this win. They feel like this is not just a big win for the presidency, but a lot of Republicans felt strongly, of course, about control of Congress. Again, the Senate is in the Republican column. I think the House of Representatives appears to be going that direction as well. Look, here in the United States, it was a big election. It had a lot of attention. I think a lot of Americans right now are just happy to have the TV ads gone.
Yes.
To have the ad buys and the TV ads for both candidates off the airwaves. And at this point, for President Trump, it's governing. It's getting sworn in January. And for him hitting the ground running, he's got to get a team in place, but they're already doing that with the presidential transition. It's been well underway, frankly, the presidential transition. That's the next key step. But yeah, a lot of Americans celebrating this big win.
Certainly, and I'm sure the Democrats will be commiserating. I mean, they're pretty thin on talent now, wouldn't you say?
Well, look, there's many in the Democrat Party who pointed to a governor of Pennsylvania, Shapiro, and other elected officials. Pete Buttigieg, who's in President Biden's cabinet right now. But it's one thing to have a great candidate, and that's important. But you got to have good policies.
For sure.
And many Americans just disagreed with the policies. This was I think, in many ways, not just a personality election. It was a policy election. Americans really put a premium on policies, particularly on the inflation, economy, and border security. I think there's a lot of voters who say, I don't like everything about President Trump. I don't like everything he says or puts on social media. But on those policies, the economy, inflation, border security, I agree with him. I think the unique thing about this election is much more about policy than personality. For some voters, about both of those things. But as for Democrats, no question they got to regroup, come together. I think you'll see them try to do that. But for now, this is a big win for Republicans, big win for President Trump.
Certainly. Matt Terrill, thank you so much for your time once again and your analysis. I really appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day.
Take care.